Hey guys, welcome back. Today we want to look at the organization of the Constitution, specifically focusing on the 7 articles. So let's get to it. First of all, though, the Constitution is basically lined out in 3 sections. The first section is called the Preamble, and in the Preamble, our founding fathers basically said the purpose for the document, why we were creating it. Think of it kind of like an introductory paragraph on an essay. The next part is the Articles, and that's where we actually see the structure of the government laid out. And then last but not least is the 27 amendments. And the amendments, that handout, I'll get you later on this week. So focusing then on the articles, the first article sets up the legislative branch. And the legislative branch is Congress. This is something that I keep repeating over and over again, so please pay attention. The legislative branch is Congress. Congress is made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and their main job is to make laws. If you need to pause me and rewind me and write that down, then please do it. Please remember that. A couple of big things in Article 1. The first is called the Elastic Clause. Now, the Constitution gives Congress the authority to make laws, but they can also do some other things, okay? They can coin money. They can fund and arm like an army and a navy. They have a whole lot of different responsibilities. But the Elastic Clause is probably the most important clause of the Constitution when it comes to the power of Congress. The Elastic Clause is also called the Necessary and Proper Clause. Write that down also. And this clause gives Congress the authority to make all laws that they think are necessary and proper. So this increases the power of Congress, or it stretches the power of Congress, which is why we call this the Elastic Clause. Congress also has expressed and enumerated powers in the Constitution. Basically, there are 18 specific powers listed in the Constitution that we'll look at in a couple days. And then also requirements for office. Now, for this part, I'm going to talk about the House of Representatives requirements and then the requirements for the Senate. So please make sure that you keep those separate. So first of all, requirements for the House of Representatives. You have to be 25 years old. You have to be a resident of the district you're going to represent. And you have to be a citizen of the United States for 7 years. If you need to, pause me and rewind and write those 3 things down. To be a senator, you have to be at least 30. You have to be a resident of the state you're going to represent. And you have to have been a citizen for at least 9 years. Okay, so pause me and rewind me if you need to. All right, moving on then to Article 2, the executive branch. Article 2, the executive branch, includes the president, the vice president, and then members of the president's cabinet. The job of the executive branch is to execute or enforce the laws. So why was the executive branch created? If you can think back to when we had the Articles of Confederation, we really had no one person that was in charge of our government. We had the president of the Congress, or of the legislative branch, but we didn't have a distinct executive leader, okay? So that's why this was created. Requirements to be president. You have to be at least 35 years old. You have to be a natural-born citizen, which means you have to have been born in the United States or one of our territories. And you have to have been a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in class. Next, Article 3 sets up the judicial branch. The judicial branch includes the Supreme Court and other federal courts. The job of the judicial branch is to interpret and apply the law. So, like I said, the judicial branch at the federal level includes the Supreme and inferior or lower federal courts. The jurisdiction, this term jurisdiction, I think is one of your vocab words. The term jurisdiction means like your area of influence or your boundaries. So like my area of influence or my jurisdiction would be my classroom. So basically, the Supreme Court has 2 different types of jurisdiction. They have original jurisdiction and they have appellate jurisdiction. So I want you to write both of those terms down, and I'm going to talk about them for just a second. The Supreme Court has original jurisdiction, meaning they can hear a case the first time it's presented if it deals with a constitutional issue or if it deals with someone like from another country, like a foreign minister or something like that. They have appellate jurisdiction in pretty much any other case. So basically, the Supreme Court can hear whatever case they want to hear, which is kind of nice, I guess, if you're on the Supreme Court. And last but not least, requirements for office. And I love talking about this. There are no constitutional requirements to be on the Supreme Court. None. There's not an age limit. There's not a residency requirement. There's not a citizenship requirement. Nothing. The only thing that has to happen if you want to be a Supreme Court justice is that you have to be nominated by the president and your nomination has to be approved by the Senate. That's it. If you can get nominated by the president and be approved by the Senate, then you're on the Supreme Court. Now, I make that sound like it's kind of an easy thing. It's really not. You have to be a very well-educated, well-respected person. You have to know your stuff. You have to have background in the court system if you even want to be approved by the Senate. So keep that in mind. All right, moving on then to Article 4. Article 4 sets up the relationship between the states. This also talks a little bit about federalism. Article 4 first talks about the full faith and credit clause. And I'm just going to give you a brief definition for this. The full faith and credit clause requires each state to honor the acts, laws, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Okay? Instead of putting laws, why don't you put records? The acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. Okay, so I'll give you an example of a legal record. A marriage certificate or a marriage license is a legal record. Okay, and I want you to keep that in mind because we're going to talk about that in class. The Privileges and Immunities of Citizens Clause. Privileges and immunities of citizens. Basically, this clause says that if you're a citizen of one state, you can't be treated differently just because you're a citizen of that state. Okay, so if I'm a citizen of Missouri and I go on vacation in Hawaii, they can't punish me for a crime differently than they would a person from Hawaii just because I'm from Missouri. Okay, now if I have a warrant out for my arrest, then obviously I'm going to be treated differently, but not just because I'm a citizen from a different state. Extradition, this is a fun one to talk about. Extradition, if you commit a crime in one state and then you flee to another state, you have to be brought back to the state in which the crime was committed. Okay, so if I commit a crime in Missouri and then I go to California, if they catch me, they can't arrest me and try me in California. Now they can arrest me and send me back to Missouri to be tried, but they can't try me for those crimes in California. Okay? And last but not least on Article 4, the admission of new states and territories. Article 4 of the Constitution gives Congress the authority to admit new states and territories. So we've often had this question of whether or not we're ever going to have a 51st state. Well, if we do, it would be up to Congress to admit that new state into our union and add a 51st star. That'd be kind of weird. All right, Article 5, deals with amending the Constitution. Now, our founding fathers spent a great deal of time constructing this really detailed and very tricky method to amend the Constitution. Someone in Congress doesn't just have an idea and say, aha, we shall amend the Constitution today. It takes a lot, okay? It takes permission from the states as well as Congress. So we're going to spend a little bit of time towards the end of this week talking about how the amendment process actually works. So we'll come back to that. Article 6 deals with the supremacy of national law. That basically says that national law is supreme. So if there's ever a conflict between a state law and a federal law, the federal law will always supersede. And last but not least, Article 7 set the requirements for ratifying the Constitution. Okay, so basically it said that if the Constitution was going to be ratified and was going to be adopted as the supreme law of the land, then 9 out of the 13 states had to agree to it. And that happened, obviously, and here we are today. So please make sure that you have completed the video questions on Edpuzzle and you've taken notes on your Constitution notes document, and we'll talk about this in class. See ya.